How many times does your phone ring and you hear,
हेलो
सर, आपको एक कॉल आपके कार्ड से संबंधित किया जा रहा है। सर, बताना चाहूंगी कि आपके खाते को 50,000 की लॉटरी लगी है।
सर, आपका एटीएम कार्ड एक्सपायरी होने वाला है सर।
ऐसे कैसे होने वाला है?
Yeah, hi sir, this is Warren and I'm calling you from the verification department of Visa and MasterCard.
सर, मैं निशा बात कर रही हूँ एचडीएफसी बैंक के बिहाफ से।
हाँ जी बोलिए।
सर, फंड्स के रिगार्डिंग कॉल किया था। कोई रिक्वायरमेंट होगी बिजनेस लोन, होम लोन, कार लोन में?
My name is Tom Tata and I'm calling you from the warranty cover. The manufacturing warranty on your washing machine has expired.
सर, मैं कोटक बैंक से हेमंत बात कर रहा हूँ। हमारी बैंक आपको दे रही है क्रेडिट कार्ड।
नहीं चाहिए।
हेलो,
नमस्कार आंटी जी, आप 2 लाख तक का पर्सनल लोन लेना चाहेंगे?
नहीं चाहिए भाई, नहीं चाहिए।
you can run, you can hide, but you just can't escape spam calls. In fact, more than 11,000 people were surveyed by community engagement platform Local Circles last month, and each one of them said that they get pesky calls regularly. And 2 in 3 respondents said that they get 3 or more pesky calls every day. So why is this still a problem? And this is despite the fact that the government had introduced the DND app way back in 2016. Remember DND, Do Not Disturb, the magical list a subscriber could get onto so that they are never disturbed by spam callers? And telecom players also let subscribers visit their website or call them and register their number in a DND list to avoid getting unwanted calls. But has that helped? Not really. 9 out of every 10 subscribers still get spam calls despite being on the DND list, as per the Local Circles survey. And very often, these unwanted calls can become more than a headache. These spam calls are often actually scam calls by fraudsters looking to get financial details of customers and dupe them. We have seen the workings in the web series Jamtara. So what will really get the regulator and telecom players to clamp down on this nuisance?
There's an urban legend that India's then Finance Minister, Pranab Mukherjee, got a call offering him insurance during a cabinet meeting. And that's why the government of India then started acting on it. Some cabinet minister here will have to get a spam call offering them insurance or a loan. And only then the regulators will start looking at this seriously.
In this episode, we try and find out why the issue of spam calls persists and what steps the regulator and telecom companies are taking. We speak to former Secretary of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, Sudhir Gupta.
The problem is there is an increase in commercial communication through unregistered telemarketers.
Director General of the Broadband India Forum, Rajat Mukherjee, who was earlier the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone Idea.
It would be unfair for us to pick on the operator as the primary irresponsible party in this particular process.
We also have Nikhil Pava, founder of news portal Medianama, who's been covering the issue of data privacy very closely, and who you just heard making a quip about the spam call to former President Pranab Mukherjee. Also joining in is my colleague from the Economic Times, Urvi Malvania, who closely tracks the telecom space and has been reporting on the industry's steps to address the spam call issue in recent months. It's Thursday, the 23rd of March. I'm your host, Mugdha Warrior from ET Prime, and you're listening to The DND Disaster, Why Spam Calls Just Won't Stop on the Morning Brief. I often joke that I get more calls from unknown numbers in a day than from the people who I actually know. So what is happening? Is the frequency of spam calls increasing? I asked my colleague Urvi.
There definitely seems to be an increase in the number of spam calls that people are getting. Just one thing is, people are getting a lot of spam calls, and I also saw some data on how many of them are actually scam calls, SCAM. So not only is it a nuisance in terms of, you have to keep taking calls from unknown numbers not knowing whether they are important or not. But a lot of them could also be fraudulent entities posing to be, a service provider that you engage with and trying to scam you of funds or information. So on both fronts, there's definitely been an increase.
But Urvi, why is the problem still persisting? And in fact, why is it increasing despite the fact that the TRAI and telecom players have been adding subscribers to the DND list?
I think there are 2 to 3 things to it. One is DND is a very opt-in sort of system. So as a consumer, you and I have to be harrowed enough to make that effort to contact our telecom operator and say, hey, listen, I don't want to get these calls. And then there's a process that follows. So a lot of times from what I've seen, being a cumbersome process, the telco will get back to you saying that your KYC is not complete or this request could not be processed at the moment. And then because all this also happens usually over messaging, so, the consumer sort of runs out of steam. The other thing is, I think, increasingly we are seeing, again, from reports, we see that a lot of the spam calls and pesky calls that are happening are actually numbers that look like yours and mine. So if I haven't saved Mukta's number, it just flashes a 10-digit number on my screen, right? Now, it could be someone I know. It could be someone who needs to get in touch with me for work. It could be a delivery guy for something I've ordered over a site. So we end up taking these calls. But these are essentially 10-digit numbers that could be personal numbers from the look of it. So these 2 things, I think, in conjunction are just, in a way, encouraging a lot of entities to bombard customers with calls.
As Urvi points out, calls from individual SIM card holders with the 10-digit numbers are the ones bypassing the system. In fact, the Local Circle survey that I had cited earlier showed that 50% of the respondents got pesky calls that originated from personal numbers. So then why are telecom operators not acting against such subscribers who are misusing their SIM cards to make such spam calls? Are they actually benefiting from such huge amounts of spam calls going through their networks? I asked Rajat Mukherjee, who was till 2019 the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone Idea and then later at ZTE Telecom India.
I don't think the operators are earning a huge amount of revenue. Obviously, there is some earning, but I don't think it's such a large amount that it will stop them from investigating this area in the first place. We've got 1.2 billion connections, and a lot of them disconnect on a daily basis. A lot of them are used for spamming. A lot of them are used for all other kinds of non-legal activity. I'm not getting into details. I don't think we can necessarily hold the operator responsible in any way for what happens once the SIM card has been verified based on the currently laid down processes from the DOT. What I'm really trying to say here is, if a subscriber comes in and shows and presents a valid Aadhaar card and or PAN card and or other proof of identity and proof of address, the operator really has little or no reason to deny him a service. He will obviously sign a form which says that he is not a telemarketer, and he will go out and start the telemarketer operation as and when he chooses to. Now, operator does not have any control on what he is going to be using. And as I was saying, yes, he is using the telecom service provider's network, and there is some revenue involved. But I don't think it is such a large revenue amount. It would be unfair for us to pick on the operator as the primary responsible party in this particular process.
So what does the regulator think about this? How accountable does it hold telecom companies? And in fact, are there glaring gaps in the TRAI's enforcement itself? I asked Sudhir Gupta, who was the secretary of TRAI between 2014 and 2017.
As far as what regulations have been done by TRAI, there has been improvement, but there is the need to constantly improve the regulations or the control mechanism so that these things are further reduced. I feel there is a significant decrease in the complaints against registered telemarketers. However, the problem is there is an increase in commercial communication through unregistered telemarketers. And as far as the unregistered telemarketers are concerned, which are not registered with anyone, the complaints which in 2020 were 3 lakh have now increased to 9 lakhs. The only remedy is if the consumer complains, then its mobile operator can take action against the delinquent. My experience is that hardly 1 to 2% of the people really make the complaint to the operator because they say, oh, chodo, why should we take trouble in? Though there is a well-defined number on which the complaint can be made, but still people do not take the trouble of making the complaint. And if there is no complaint, I don't know how mobile operator can really fathom that this person or this telemarketer is making such calls. It has to be complaint-based. Mobile operator is not supposed to listen to the conversation between P2P calls. So the only way the operator can take action is if there is a complaint. Again, I'll give you some statistics. Between April 2020 to December 2020, total complaints which were received was around 1,23,000, which have increased to 2,58,000. And the operators have either issued warning or disconnect or put some usage caps on the concerned delinquent individual or telemarketer or disconnected those phones. But that is only based on the complaints which are received.
But should the onus be only on customers to complain? How can the TRAI and telecom players work more actively to curb the menace of the growing number of unregistered telemarketers?
The first and foremost which I feel is that the KYC should be further tightened, because whenever some investigation is done by principal entities on whose behalf the calls are or messages have been sent or by some other agencies, most generally it is found that that SIM doesn't belong to that person. It belongs to some ABC. So no action could be taken. So what I feel is the eKYC should be introduced and it should be further tightened so that these SIMs cannot be purchased in bulk or otherwise by these people. Secondly, like TRAI can only take action either against the telecom operators or those registered telemarketers. But as far as the business entities are concerned, like there is a builder who wants people to know about its plan, so it asks some telemarketer, okay, you make these 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakh, 10 lakh calls or messages, send messages. So, but when you take action, the action is only on the telemarketer. There is no action on the business entity. And TRAI do not have any power as such to take action against any non-telecom person. So that is somehow the IT Act or Privacy Act or which is going to come. Such provision should also be made that if someone's privacy is violated because of such act, the person on whose behalf it is being done, action should also be taken or some penalty should also be imposed on it.
Let's take a look at what the TRAI has done in recent years to address the issue of unwanted calls and messages. In 2018, TRAI had mandated telcos to deploy blockchain-based distributed ledger technology or DLT systems. Now, under this DLT system, the telcos essentially created a ledger where information about the telemarketer and the brand would be stored, along with the header, which is basically the name or the label which customers receive messages from. For example, when your bank sends you an OTP, you get a standard message with the name of the bank or the initials of the bank. That's the header. Along with the header, the template for the various categories of messages going out were also to be registered. Once these were registered, in the next step, the TRAI deployed something called scrubbing of promotional messages that were being sent out. Scrubbing essentially entails the tallying of the message being sent out with the registered template and sender details already recorded on the ledger. Only if the message going out matches the template would it be sent. But clearly, this technology too has not been entirely effective. In fact, just last month, the regulator summoned major telecom companies to review the current state of the quality of service and directed them to block all unverified headers and templates within the next 30 to 60 days. So, and pardon some wordplay here, why did blockchain not help in blocking unwanted communication? Let's hear from Nikhil Pava, founder and editor of Medianama.
Blockchain was pitched as a solution to this problem. Has it solved anything? It hasn't. Spam and scam have only increased. There's an urban legend that India's then finance minister, Pranab Mukherjee, got a call offering him insurance during a cabinet meeting. And that's why the government of India then started acting on it. So maybe, some cabinet minister here will have to get a spam call offering them insurance or a loan. And only then the regulators will start looking at this seriously. But what they did was they started banning telemarketers that did not stick to the plan, that didn't register as a telemarketer, didn't use a particular ID for calling, didn't do promotions on transactional messages. All of that, bit by bit, because of lack of enforcement, started going down the drain. It opened up. All of this happens now. So for me, it's a problem of enforcement. The TRAI has failed to enforce, and the telecom operators have also failed to enforce.
So, like Nikhil pointed out, is poor enforcement the main issue here? I ask former TRAI Secretary Sudhir Gupta.
It's in this, the regulation which was issued in 2018, where the use of DLT or the blockchain technology has been initiated. Till date, also, all the steps which were there in that regulation have not been completed. Still, there was some lacuna in that headers, and which was being misused by the telemarketers, because the principal entities with the business entities, they were not authenticating those headers. Similarly, the content template has some variables, because you can't just fix the complete content. It has to have few variables which the principal entities and telemarketers can fill in. So earlier, the number of variables were not well defined. So it was being misused. So now in February, TRA has defined it and fixed it as 2. So similarly, these are steps being taken, and I think it will go on till we reach a certain success level.
Former telecom veteran Rajat Mukherjee, however, has a more optimistic take, and he says that some good progress has been made with the distributed ledger technology.
2.5 lakh principal entities which are registered, who amongst them share approximately 6 lakh headers. And there are 55 lakh approved message templates which are pushed through to the consumers through registered telemarketers and TSPs using these distributed ledger technology systems. But this is just one example of what the operators have done recently to try and reduce the number of complaints. And I understand that this reduction has been to the extent of approximately 60% for registered telemarketers. Now, the unregistered individual telemarketers are the cowboys in the area, if you will. So it's not that the operators are silent and passive bystanders in this entire thing. I think a lot of work is being done, but I will not deny the fact that the effect on the ground is still to be seen.
Urvi says that a new consent layer is in the works for the DLT, which will make the technology more effective.
So with DLT, it was a 3-step process. So first you had to register the telemarketer, the brand, and their headers. Now, once that was done, the second part of this whole DLT platform process was whatever messages are going in bulk through telemarketer platforms have to be scrubbed against the DLT platform. So the templates and the headers and the marketers who are registered on the platform, only those messages that comply with the registered template can go through. So these two, to the best of what we know, have been complied with. Now, the third part of the whole DLT mandate was to get consumer consent. So that is to say that I, as a consumer, who do I want to get promotional messages from? And that is where the issue lies, because it's an opt-in thing. That means you need consumer proactiveness to actually complete this step. Second thing is there are n number of registered templates. I think there are 5 million registered templates minimum on the DLT platform right now. And for each consumer to say yes or no to all these messages is very difficult. So to address this, the regulator has proposed something called the digital consentization platform. But we're still to see how and what shape it will take. From what we speak to a lot of the stakeholders in the industry, the consensus is that instead of consent being there by default, it should not be there by default. So as a consumer, if I want messages from a real estate firm, or if I want messages from e-commerce platforms, then I have to just say yes to that. And anything I don't say yes to should not reach out to me. And the whole idea of the DLT platform was to ensure that not only is it legitimate registered telemarketers that reach out to customers, but they're also just entities that the customer is okay getting messages from. So that bit of consumer consent is where the process is stuck as of now.
The TRAI is now contemplating a new method to stop the menace of spam calls. In November last year, the TRAI released a consultation paper proposing something called a calling name presentation, or CNAP. What is CNAP? Urvi, who has been reporting on this closely, tells us more.
So what it proposed was something called CNAP. It essentially, right now, when you get a call, the number flashes on your screen. That's caller line identification number. So you know the number that's calling you, but you don't know who is calling you. For that, you need a third-party app. What the TRAI has proposed is that the name of the person who is calling you, or more accurately, the entity that's calling you. So if the number is registered under a small firm, for example, then you get the name of the firm. That, it's someone from XYZ firm is calling me. That is what they have proposed. And what they've proposed is that it should be a mandatory service that every telecom service provider provides to every customer.
But the proposal has raised serious privacy concerns, with experts warning that it could lead to data harvesting and more phishing attacks. Nikhil Pava says that this could particularly be detrimental for women.
Let me look at it from a woman's perspective, right? If she calls up someone, for example, a store, or calls someone by mistake, then both her name, full name, and her mobile number will be visible to that individual. Now, it's very easy for someone, once they've got a full name, they have a broad idea of location, if it's from the same city, and the mobile number, they can start, doing a search on Instagram, on Google, on Facebook, on Twitter, collecting photographs, and that can create an environment where someone could potentially be a stalker because they have access to a broader amount of information.
That's scary. Nikhil also adds how the caller ID or the CNAP can lead to more misuse of our data.
Mobile numbers are effectively pseudonymous. So while they are an identifier, they allow us to be anonymous. The moment you add a name to it, then you link a name and a number together. So in the absence of a data protection bill out there, where there is literally no control over who collects our data, how do they collect our data, how do they use it, can they share it forward. One of my primary concerns was, can this be used to create a database of people and their names? Someone who just wants to harvest data could set up like a phone number, and effectively when that number gets called, instead of just noting down automatically a number that's being called, now they can note down both the name and the number and create a database of names and numbers of people who may have called that number. And then it becomes a risk, because if that data gets sold, then we already have sophisticated phishing attacks taking place, and that's a risk for individuals. Those phishing attacks will become more commonplace, will have KYC data, which means that they will seem more authentic to an individual. That is of concern.
Urvi highlights that while privacy is the most serious concern, there are also some technical challenges with implementing such a caller ID.
From the telco's point of view specifically, there's a cost involved to integrate such a technology into the network. But there's also a technology mismatch, because India is not a purely smartphone market. So you have a lot of 2G users even as of now. So this technology is not compatible with all 2G devices. So it is going to become a case of implementing something for the whole customer base, but a huge chunk of it not being able to get the benefit of it. And that, of course, then results in spillage of network costs.
And don't forget, there are already third-party apps such as Truecaller that are popular with Indian users. For Truecaller, in fact, India is the biggest market with more than 200 million users. And it is clear that more and more Indians want such caller ID apps. According to data platform Sensor, Truecaller saw 117 million downloads in India in 2022 alone, its highest in 4 years. But Truecaller itself has faced its own share of data breaches. In fact, in November, we had covered the allegations of breach of data privacy norms against Truecaller in depth on the Morning Brief. A caller ID doesn't seem to be the only arrow in TRAI's quiver to fight pesky calls. The regulator is now also trying to see how artificial intelligence and machine learning can be used in keeping a check on pesky calls. Urvi, who reported the move just earlier this month, tells us more.
Personally, I think that AI/ML would be a game changer, because what the technical analysts suggests is basically your AI software will be able to study the duration and the frequency of calls. So even as journalists, you and I will not have, let's say, 15-second calls up to 50, 60 of them in a day. So that's a distinct pattern for telemarketing calls. So then you identify using AI and machine learning, of course, because it needs to sophisticate itself. And then, you flag these numbers over a period of time that will help identify them. And then you take whatever action that you're supposed to.
This brings us to the most important aspect of this whole issue. And that is of how spam calls and messages can end up duping people of their money. Urvi relates a story of how her friend almost fell for one such scam.
So just to give you an example, the other day, a friend of mine got a message from one of these e-commerce platforms. The header looked exactly like that particular e-commerce platforms. And they said that, we need you to re-verify your number. And a lot of these e-commerce portals do that. They ask you to re-verify your number every now and then. And, she'd got such a message earlier. So she did it. And then she used to use her number to log into that account. She just got a message saying that your number has been reset. And she realized that her account for that e-commerce portal was no longer associated with her number. So there's evidently some sort of, foul play at work. Now, thankfully, she's been the kind of person to opt for cash on delivery. So she didn't really have any risk of financial funds being stolen or anything. But it does give the person with access to her account, access to her home address, her office address, and her spending patterns because they know what she's ordered. So it's not always only about financial fraud, but it's also a safety issue where, people's residential addresses are housed on these databases.
A recent report by cyber intelligence platform CloudSec showed that the banking and finance sector was the most targeted industry in the fake customer care scam, followed by healthcare, telecommunication, and entertainment. So now the TRAI, along with RBI and SEBI, have come together to form a joint committee to curb phishing and cyber frauds, which the Economic Times reported in November. One of the methods is to ask banks and other financial institutions to whitelist their websites or links. This is what the TRAI Secretary V. Raghunandan had told the Economic Times. Has any progress been made yet? I ask Urvi.
So I don't think they've really given out details about what exactly is the plan of action. The committee has met, the JCOR, and the idea is to stem unsolicited commercial communication, which is UCC, or as we call pesky calls and messages, and to take corrective punitive action in where it is happening, the scams are happening. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how they go about it. Again, the multiple agencies, governmental agencies involved, but we should be hearing something along those lines very soon.
I also ask former TRAI Secretary Sudhir Gupta whether a joint effort is the only way to address the issue of phishing scams and why such an approach is being taken up only now.
I won't say that this approach means the joint effort has not been done earlier. I remember when I was in TRAI, somewhere in 2014-15, we had collaborated, both TRAI and RBI, and we had forced the banks to employ only those telemarketers who are registered with TRAI or the operator, and to warn those banks and financial institutions if any delinquency is found. So it's not that earlier we had not collaborated, but now, as you know, that last 3-4 years, the number of digital transactions has increased manifold. And as per a report of RBI for the year 2021, there has been a rise in the number of frauds related to digital transactions, including UCC. UCC is unsolicited commercial communication. The report stated that the value of frauds in digital transactions increased from 1.06 lakh crores in FY 1920 to 1.29 lakh crores in 2021, which is an increase of 21.9%, quite high. There is now a further urgency to stop such frauds or to stop such scamsters, because now everything is online. All bank accounts are online. You transact things online. So that's why this kind of a collaboration, as you are saying, has come to light.
India is currently the world's second largest telecom market. There were over 1.14 billion wireless subscribers in the country as of September 2022. There is an urgent need for tighter regulations and stricter enforcement to weed out the menace of spam calls that's troubling almost every subscriber. The new telecom bill, which is likely to be tabled in the parliament soon, looks to bring out harsher penalties for spam and fraudulent messages. It also proposes to bring in communication apps such as WhatsApp and Signal under its ambit. For many of us, our WhatsApp inboxes are now also flooded with spam. But as we heard from our guests, regulation will be effective only when it is enforced fully. Until then, all we can do is register our numbers on our service provider's DND list, and if we have the patience, block numbers or lodge complaints. And the next time an unknown number flashes on your device, well, we can just play a little game of whether it is important or not. Most of the time, I lose. That's all on this episode. I'm Mugdha Warrior, and you were listening to the DND Disaster Why spam calls just won't stop, only on the Morning Brief. This episode was produced by Sumit Pandey with sound design by Indranil Bhattacharjee. Executive producers Anupriya Bahadur, Anirban Chaudhary and Arijit Burman. Do like and share this episode. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday and is available on all major podcast streaming platforms. Do tune into ET Play, our latest platform for all audio content, including The Morning Brief. Thank you for listening and have a good week ahead. All external sound clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.